Hello and welcome, young viewer. We are checking out the STEINER S432 4X Prism. This thing, if you didn't watch the unboxing, is gigantic. If you run out of bullets in your gun, you can simply take it off with two Allen keys and bash someone over the head with it. With that being said, however, let's take a look and see what we've got. We have some illumination that is noticeable on our white background in a pretty bright environment, and that's always good to see. Is it truly daytime bright though? We're going to have to wait and find that out. One thing we do have a lot of at its maximum illumination here is bleed out. This is very reminiscent so far of the STEINER Military 1-5 LPVR I reviewed a while back, and that was only okay as far as the illumination goes. Definitely not on par with the new high-end stuff. They move a little mushy, but the clicks are very positive.
Illumination down here is visible. One thing I will note, the amount of light this thing lets in down here is pretty high compared to most other magnified optics. All right, that was right. Looked pretty good. So it looks pretty good. Let's do 30 down. That looks pretty good. That's all I'm going to do for this because it doesn't really make sense to do anything else. But at least it mostly returns to zero, and it looks like it tracks pretty straight. Got a lot of harmonics coming through this thing. But it looks like it does a pretty good job.
And if you're wondering, I did speed those sections up. This being a prism, there's only certain ways I can film it to have it come to life for you. Now, if you're unfamiliar with using prisms in the real world, yes, you can use prisms and LPVOs, or any optic for that matter, with some sort of magnification, with both eyes open in a more dynamic role. But it doesn't really translate well into video. You'll all get seasick, and no one's going to watch it. So instead, I'm sort of limited to just having static environments such as this. And speaking of such as this, where the hell are we and what are we doing here? Well, I needed to have you guys understand two very important things about this prism. One, its image sharpness, and two, its massive field of view. If you saw the unboxing, you know what I'm talking about. This thing is gigantic, but it's gigantic by design. More on that very soon, though. First, let's take a look at the illumination and see how it works down here. Yeah, we're under artificial light, but it's still pretty bright. Definitely not middle of the sun out and about, but it'll suffice for right now. At maximum, you can clearly see we still have a lot of bleed out into the reticle, and that's 6 o'clock. It's noticeable here, but you can't really see it from the front. Now, let's talk about the targets. There's one mini IPSC target on the wall at about 55 to 60 yards, a full-size IPSC at about 50, and the rest of them are going to be full-sized. And this is one of the party pieces about this optic in particular. The first thing we're going to look at is the sharpness. You see, whether you're at 60-ish yards or inside of it, here's about 20, you still have a very good image. And then when you bring it up even closer, this target is within 10 yards. You still have a very sharp, usable image. And keep in mind, the only thing you can adjust on this is the eyepiece in the back. That's it. And now let me have you understand the field of view through this thing. On the left is the S432, and on the right is the Leupold Mark VI set at 4x. Now, a couple things we can note is just how much farther forward the Leupold is as opposed to the S432, but nevertheless, you can see how different they both are. And in order to get the same sort of view through the Leupold as the S432, we have to back it out. We have to back it way back to about 2.8x. So you're missing out on 1.2x worth of magnification to get roughly the same field of view. That's a lot. Now let's move on to a more familiar setting. I've already proven to you that this thing has very good sharpness inside of 50 yards, but regardless, Here is a power transformer at 30 yards. Because of the massive field of view on this thing, we could be looking at that and the 800-yard power towers in the background, and the image speaks for itself. If that's not enough for you, look at what happens when I crop the image. It takes up almost the entire screen. It's huge. If you're going to be setting up a light machine gun or a 308 battle rifle somewhere for Overwatch, this would be a pretty competent option, I feel. You have excellent visibility through it. You have good brightness. You have excellent sharpness. I mean, what more could you really want? Well, maybe you might want a touch more illumination. Here on full, you can just make it out, but that's it. It's very reminiscent of the military 1-5 that I reviewed, where if it's anything less than really bright sunny day, it's probably enough. But here, for someone like myself at least, I wish it was just a little bit brighter. That's one of the major drawbacks in my opinion. But it does have a night vision mode, so if you do plan on using this with nods, there you go. Another thing you might have to take into consideration is just how tight the eye box is on this. It's not as tight as some other prisms that I've looked through, namely the Phacog that I did, the Primary Arms 2.5 that I did a while ago. I've looked through a couple of other ones, but they're all pretty tight. At least with this, you have a little bit of flexibility moving farther back, but ultimately you have to be right on top of it to get a good view through this thing. It's a little bit better, I would say, than most LPVOs at 4x, but still it's in that same sort of realm. Again, just something that you have to take note of. To finalize this conversation on the illumination, here we are in a much darker environment. Here on full, it is too bright. It's clearly bleeding out. And as we step it down, it will become much more manageable. But the illumination on this thing is very lackluster. I wish it was a little bit better, but it is what it is. And that might be perfectly fine for you. And with that, let's get into my final thoughts, which I promise I will keep brief. This is a very niche optic. This is something that you need to have the need and necessity for you to even consider getting yourself one of these. At around $1,000 brand new, yeah, you could find them a little bit cheaper used. It's a lot of money for most people, myself included, to be throwing around on something we're not too sure about. However, with that being said, the limitations that prisms have are being sort of rectified with the augmentation of mini red dots or mini reflexes on top of prisms, which is becoming more and more popular, it seems. But again, if you're thinking about going down that route, there are much less expensive options. Sure, they might not be as good as this as far as the overall field of view, the brightness, the sharpness, but at less than a third the price, sometimes that even includes a little red dot on top, that's hard to ignore. All in all, this STEINER S432 absolutely blew my mind with, first off, just how big and heavy it was, but then it blew my mind again with just how big the view through this thing was. I had absolutely no need for it, nor will I ever have a need for it, but I kind of wish I did, because this thing would absolutely be sitting on a rifle right now in my safe, just waiting to get used. And with that, that concludes this review. A massive thank you to Reddit user MagDumper for sending this over for review. It's truly great to see how big and warm and welcoming the community is. It just, here, take my stuff and review it. And they have their absolute total faith in you. And it really means a lot. So thank you very much, MagDumper. And thank you all very much for watching. As always, hope to see you again next time. And a very huge thank you to all of my Patreon providers. Without you, this wouldn't be possible. If you'd like to help support the channel but don't want to join my Patreon, I completely understand. But you can still help support by using my affiliate links in the description below. Thanks again for watching.